Everybody, welcome to Choosers of the Slain, the Studio Valkyrie podcast. This is our first episode 1. Today we're going to talk about the LVO, which has just wrapped up, get into the some of the new Genestealer Cult stuff, and just kind of go through what we look like. But first off, let's do some introductions so you know who we are and why we're here.
Well, hello. My name is Lucas. I am owner of Studio Valkyrie and Valhalla Games and Sundries here in Montague, Michigan. I've been playing 40K since the late 90s. Started out at the tail end of 2nd edition, rolled right into 3rd, playing ever since. Kind of took a little bit of break around 5th, 6th. Tried to come back. Didn't have many opponents. Then I found a new group. Did the tournament scene for a bit in 3rd edition, and then kind of came back to tournaments in 7th. Been playing a lot in 8th, host a lot of games here at the shop, run a lot of leagues, hoping to start a ITC tournament in the area. So kind of really interested in both the fluffy narrative and also competitive kind of way to enjoy 40K. So that's a little bit about me. And my partner in crime here.
Yep, and I'm Nate. I used to run Shoreline Minis in Muskegon, Michigan. I've been playing 40K since about 2008, so mid 5th edition. Started out with Eldar, still have my Eldar, and have kind of dabbled back and forth through a lot of different things through then. But ran Shoreline Minis for about 5 years, and I, as well as Luke's, have done commission painting for quite a while now, on and off, just when the muse strikes us, I suppose.
Or the money is needed.
Well, there's that. So, yeah, that's kind of what we do and where we've been. And between us, we've probably got at least, 35 years of gaming experience?
Yeah, something like that.
It's a lot.
I suppose anyway. I didn't mention what I play. I probably should have said that.
Yeah, that's a good
so
point.
at my core, I'm an orc player. So it was the first real army I collected. I mean, the first thing I played was Rogue, or the little Rogue Trader article in White Dwarf Necrons, where like 4 models was a 1,500 point army in 2nd edition.
Space Terminators.
Yeah. But then as soon as 3rd edition came out, I was like, orcs, what are those? And it's all she wrote since then. But quite often my reach exceeds my grasp with my hobby on the orcs. And so while they are my first love and I always come back to them, never have a fully painted orc army except for a very small period in 3rd edition. So I do a lot of Imperial stuff. There's something we'll talk about later is a project I'm working on right now. But, Space Sharks, the good old Carcharodon's Astra, a little bit of a Imperial Guard off and on over the years, almost always Catachin because they're the only regiment that matters. And let's see, I've done, kind of want to do some AdMech, haven't gotten into that yet, but I like the Imperium, love the orcs. Chaos is cool, I guess.
Yeah, Chaos is cool. Especially with Shadowspear coming out. But that's not this podcast.
Yeah, my only experience with Eldar is I had a small Harlequin army for like a year and a half. And it was cool. And then I sold it. So, but that's me. Largely orcs, also Imperium.
Yeah. So kind of at that, I guess, with this being the first episode, why don't we talk a little bit about what we plan to do with this podcast and with this channel in general. I'm going to let Lucas kind of get into some of those details there.
All right. Well, kind of what we're thinking with this is we want to be able to have some engaging discussions about 40K in general, the meta, the community, the hobby, just kind of like what we see from our perspective and our experience. So a lot of discussions through podcasts or, social media, things like that. Might even get some blog posts up if we get super ambitious. But the idea of just kind of us bending our experience and what we hope is a degree of charisma to entertaining you and talking about the hobby in general through this podcast or websites. And we want to get to the point where we're creating kind of more regular content as well with battle reports or reviews of products that are coming out. Both of us not only have experience with the hobby, but we also have experience as, retailers of the hobby. And so, kind of helping understand like what's hype and what's actually like good for the game that's coming out, and how things might affect the meta or the hobby or just the fan base in general, because we see in very real terms of dollars and cents like how various releases affect things. And then we, like I said, we want to review new products that are coming out. A little bit later in this episode, we're going to talk about the Genestealer Cults Codex. But we're also going to talk about our own hobbies. We're going to kind of keep you guys updated with our hobby progress or things that we're working on. And we also want to get to the point where we can do tutorial videos, like whether it's painting videos or just terrain things or conversion tips. So we're hoping to bring you kind of a wealth of information that's just 40K hobby related. And hopefully along the way you have a good time. So,
yeah. So at that, we'll take a quick break here and then come back. We can talk about LVO and sort of what happened there and how great the Castellan is.
Yeah. Spoiler alert. There's a lot of Castellan knights. So.
Yeah.
All right. We'll be right back. All right, so here we are talking episode 1, LVO. Just happened, last weekend?
Yep.
Big shakeup. There were a lot of Castellans. It was different. Nobody expected it. Oh, wait.
Yeah, I think everybody expected that.
Yeah, that is what everybody expected.
Congrats to Brandon Grant on winning that. That's a big accomplishment, obviously. 700 people, huge singles event.
Oh, absolutely. And I also want to just go ahead and give a shout out that he used the only correct regiment to play as the Astra Militarum.
Catechins. Yeah, of course. I don't like Catechins, to be fair, but
and that's fair. They probably don't like you.
They don't think the Catechins like a lot of people. To be fair, but
I'm a little biased. I'm biased. Go John Rambo. So I thought it was really great to see, though, that his list was actually like an Astra Militarum army that happened to have a Castellan in it. It also was nice to see a brigade instead of 3 battalions.
Yes, for sure.
So I got to give it to him there, really utilizing the Catechin regimental doctrine of getting to reroll those random number of shots. Just a absolute horde of Rambos on the table. But it was nice to see. And also kind of as reports would have it, in the later stages of the game, while the Castellan was still a Castellan knight, the Catechins were doing the heavy lifting. Yeah. And so it was really nice to see not the cookie cutter.
Well, I think you see with the knight in particular, something like the Castellan, that it can only dominate so much of the board, especially later in the game when you're looking at objectives and scoring secondaries and everything there. You need your guys on the ground. You have to have it. That knight can only hold so much.
That's true. And when you have 475,000 guardsmen because you're running an actual brigade,
right?
There's really nowhere that you're not. So that was really cool. So it was just a great list. Props to those guys at Frontline. That's got to be a circus to run.
Oh yeah. Huge shout out to them. They did work, put on a great event. So
especially some of the changes that they did. The nitty gritty details of it we won't go into here because everybody has covered everything. But I really liked how they kind of introduced that half round to kind of weed out when there was just so many people who had undefeated lists. Just the way that they managed, got 700 players. That's just crazy.
Yeah.
And so that just an amazing event. I would like to get to it myself at some point. And I also, like I said early in the introduction, would like to kind of get involved in running an ITC event here in our area to kind of dip my toe in that and see if we could grow that up to something. So,
Midwest Open 2020? Is that what I'm hearing?
Something like that. That's the hope. So we kind of wanted to talk about just not just to keep, praising the Catechin list that won the tournament, but also just the fact that we saw some interesting other things. I mean, there was you mentioned, you wanted to kind of call out that there's a Tau list.
Yeah, there was a Tau list in the top 8. I was quite happy to see that, not because I'm particularly much of a Tau lover, but because it's kind of different. It's nice to see some Xenos love in there. A couple of Eldar and Ynnari lists. I think that was expected. I heard early on that people were thinking Ynnari would be sweeping, but
well, they did make it to the top table.
Yeah, they definitely did, and I have to say the flyer list with the Alatok Flyers and the Void Raven, it does work. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely.
So it's just tough to take on that night. And when you get enough firepower, even that -1 to hit on the flyers and the hard to hit rule and all that, it's just, you get brought down.
Just drowning in dice at that point.
Yeah.
But one thing I kind of liked about seeing that Tau list was, as much as I hated them in 7th edition of the Riptide, because the Riptide just dominated 7th edition, I don't know, I guess just seeing Riptides in play again after some of the changes that have come in chapter approved that made them affordable. Yeah. When 8th edition hit and everybody was playing out of the index, like, the Riptide cost so many points, and it really got hit with the kind of nerf bat because it just wasn't cost effective to run it. That or the Ghost Kill. So to see some of the like iconic Tau units like back in action, I thought was kind of cool. I don't play Tau, but I think it's neat that they get to use their Gundams again.
Yes, for sure. The mech side of Tau definitely is always fun to see on the table. It just looks cool.
Yeah, and also any point spent on a Riptide is not a point on a 400th Fusion Crisis suit.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah.
But that kind of speaking to the meta in general, just something that we've kind of touched on a little bit, talking about the Castellan and what it can and can't do.
Yeah. So I'm gonna hop on my game design background pretension high horse here for a second and just say I feel like the Castellan as it stands right now is kind of bad for the game, and I would honestly be really surprised if Games Workshop doesn't address it at some point, because 3 of the top 8 lists and a huge number of the lists overall had a Castellan. Basically, if you were running Imperium, you were either running a Castellan or you were running Guilliman. And that's fair. That just says to me that is a must-take unit. And honestly, in good balancing, like, I think they need to get rid of must-take units and open up other options. Even if it's still knights, which I'd be fine with. I feel like everyone running the Castellan shows that the Castellan is a little too good for what it costs. But I don't know. I don't play knights. I generally don't play Imperium. So maybe Luke, you have a different take on that.
No, my take is pretty similar. My thoughts on it are that I don't like auto includes in general. As much as I will, I'll definitely go to the mat to argue anybody if they're playing a vanilla Space Marine army that the Ironclad Dreadnought with a Hurricane Bolter and a Seismic Hammer should be an auto include in every vanilla Marine army.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I don't like, oh, well, I'm playing orcs, so I have to have a big mech with a shock attack gun. I just kind of feel that to some extent, there's no way around it. Like, to some extent, like when you're playing a game where things have stats and things cost points, there are going to be things, nothing can be perfectly balanced. There's going to be things that are better than other things.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I just would like to see more armies have multiple ways to play instead of like, oh, you're playing orcs, I know exactly what to expect, which granted, that's a bad example right now because the orc codex is just phenomenal. I have enough points to bring a knight, so that knight must be a Castellan.
Right.
Or if it's not a Castellan, it's a Gallant, because, just throwing a Gallant across the table and face rolling people is also very effective.
Sure.
So I guess where I am really, I'm in agreement that it's not good for the game. Where I'm torn is how that gets addressed.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Because something I don't like is when everything is addressed by virtue of point changes. Because the issue with everything just being addressed by point changes, to me, feels like a way for Games Workshop to essentially curate a game that will constantly make people have to buy more stuff. That doesn't mean that that's really what they're doing,
right? But
it creates that illusion.
Sure.
Because when a unit isn't being used enough, they drop the points. And when they drop the points, the first thing that the naysayers online is like, oh, they just want me to buy more Marines.
Yeah, it's certainly something they've been accused of plenty of times in the past. And in some spans of time, definitely were doing. At least, or seem to be.
And so I absolutely loved Bolter Discipline that got added as the beta rule in the February White Dwarf, spoiler alert, is that essentially it was a way to make across the board all Astartes models, whether they're, loyalist or heretic, better without touching their points.
Yeah.
Like they just all got better.
And they needed it.
They absolutely needed
power armor in general needed it.
Yeah.
So,
I would argue that they probably still could use a slight point drop.
I think you're probably right.
It was really I was really happy to see a balance issue addressed with an ability and not point drops.
Right.
And so in that respect, back to the Castellan, just making it more expensive doesn't feel, I don't know. I almost wonder if how they addressed like they did with the stratagem changes with like the Agents of Ect and things like that, where the stratagems cost more command points because they were too easy to achieve.
Yeah.
The real thing that the Castellan, just what makes it dominate is not only is it just a solid model on its own, but people bring command point batteries so that they can use that stratagem that lets it operate at top tier.
Right.
So do you do kind of like rotate ion shields and say if it's one command point to rotate the ion shields on a Knight Questoris, but if it's a Dominus, it costs 3?
Right.
Do you do that for that particular stratagem where you say make it costs 1 or 2 command points more if it's used on a Dominus?
Sure.
Because, and that's the thing too, is the game is, while it's not like as complicated as say a role-playing game like Shadowrun,
right.
Warhammer is a relatively complicated game of chess.
Yeah, there's a lot of interaction that happens.
Yeah, and so like a slight nudge, like making something cost more command points, could topple the house of cards. It might, it might just be like, oh, this thing is dominating the meta because it's combination with this particular stratagem. Well, now that stratagem is slightly more expensive, there's something else that's more effective than bringing that unit. And so I would be interested to see something besides just making the Castellan more expensive.
Yeah. I mean, I can kind of see that. I think you get into a realm where it's difficult to say, the meta has shaped around this model or around this unit. And so we need to find a way to address that. How do we address it without radically affecting all the other armies in the game? And with knights, it's tough to do things without just changing their points values. So in the end, I think you wind up saying, okay, either the knight gets more expensive or the knight gets nerfed, which nobody wants to see. Yeah. Nobody wants to see a flat nerf where all of a sudden its stats change or anything like that. That's too much.
Well, yeah, and it also would, not only would that just be not a fun solution, it also would not feel very fluffy.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Story driven or whatever, narrative or whatever phrase you want to use, because the Castellan is supposed to be this massive,
right. Right.
It's the closest thing that the knights have to fielding like a straight up Titan.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, your other options are make other stuff better, make other stuff cheaper, or you can address things with like command points and that, because that does really fuel the extra knight being there. There are different ways to do that. We've talked about that before, but that's for a different time.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That is absolutely fair.
Although I will make a point kind of related to that when we talk about Genestealer Cults, because what they do with Brood Brothers is really interesting, and I wonder if it points to what we're going to see in the future.
It may very well.
Yeah.
That's something that I do enjoy about Games Workshop, is they do play enough stuff close to the chest that when you see a change in one codex, you think, what's coming in the next fact drop, or what's, so there's definitely some hints in the Genestealer Codex as to the future. And I think that's a good segue. So we're going to take a break real quick and we'll come back and talk about the Genestealer Cult. Welcome back. We're going to talk for a little bit about the new codex release, the Genestealer Cult. I'm really excited to see this one, not just because seeing factions get their codexes is awesome, but also as a former Genestealer Cult player, and I say former because I sold them, seeing them get some love is making me happy.
Yeah. Yeah, the new models in particular. I mean, Games Workshop knocked it out of the park with this one.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm a sucker for Gribblies and mind control and the whole like pseudo alien looking kind of thing, and the miner aesthetic is great, but just the new stuff in particular. I mean, we've seen the Aberrants and the Abominant before, and that's, you know, they're great. Don't get me wrong, but they have been around. But
yeah,
you know, the Jackals.
Oh god, the Jackals and the Jackal Alphas.
Oh, and Alphas. Yep, and all the characters. Like every character model they came out with, I feel like is just characterful. You know, there's so much flavor in those models where you have the Nexus with the hologram to plan on, and you've got the boombox guy from the 80s, and you've got
hype man, the Genestealer Cult hype man.
Yep, exactly. But you know, the Sanctus, like the Sanctus model is just such a cool model too, and the Locust is quite possibly one of my favorites of the new ones.
So something that I love about the new line is when they first launched the Genestealer Cult stuff towards the tail end of 7th, it felt like it was such an awesome characterful army.
Yeah.
But it felt so limited because you had a very, very limited run of miniatures.
Right.
And so this just massive dump of characters, like even if there's kind of limited customization, unless you do some heavy conversion with the models where it's like, you know, the female Magus looks this way, the old male Magus looks this way.
Right.
That's okay though, because you have like 50 million characters to choose from. In reality, it's what, like 8 or 9 or whatever it is.
It's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot. And so the really cool thing, in my opinion, is they took a line that was just so characterful, and they were just like, you know what, we're going to do this right. Like, we're going to really flesh this out. And just something that also kind of plays into that, and this is something that we wanted to talk about, was it also looks like there's a lot of solid ways to play the Genestealer Cult. And so, I mean, not only is there a broad range of cool and interesting models, like that leads right into how they play, because you can focus on different things. If you want to talk about that.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting to see that you have a lot of strong melee options. I mean, nobody likes getting a blob of 20 Genestealers to the face. There's not much in the game that stands up to that all that well.
Yeah, that's true.
But even at that, you know, you can run them strong melee with those. You can run your heavy mining weapons with your acolytes. You can run, you know, your aberrants, who are basically just trucks, just a bunch of trucks.
Absolute monsters.
Speaking of trucks, the Goliath Rock Grinder. I mean, the charge that into somebody and watch a unit get mulched by it. I mean, there's lots of melee options, and Cult Ambush, of course, with underground set up for infantry and bikes. It's easy to get in your opponent's face if you're not zoned out and everything. But you can also run a shooting army. You look at like a Hive Cult army, where if you pull the Warlord traits and you pull, you know, all the different options you have there, like you can make a very shooting focused Genestealer Cults army and supplement that with Astra Militarum stuff. And it's very easy to play an army that goes backfield and just stays backfield.
And that's something that's really, really neat. You know, we kind of wanted to talk about too, is just the synergy options, like the things that you can really do, being able to play with both Tyranids and Guard.
Yeah.
And this may have been kind of part of my downfall when I was playing them at the beginning of 8th edition, was that I kind of looked at it like, you know, within the fluff of the army, there's Emergence Day, like the day that like the Tyranids have gotten here, and then the cult kind of, you know, shows itself and is
Emergent Ascension Day
or Ascension Day.
I think that.
Yeah, whichever anyway. It is. It's been a while. Yeah. But like, so I had themed my army around that, like the day the Tyranids showed up, and so I was really focusing on a Genestealer Cult army with Tyranid allies, and I felt like in 7th edition there was a lot of cool like ideas that I could do for that. And I came into 8th edition and the Tyranid Codex came out, and I was like, this is awesome. And I really focused on that. And then I just wasn't terribly successful. And I think part of that might have been just maybe they didn't match my play style at the time, or maybe I would say, you know, the index list was pretty weak, but then, you know, what was it last year? The 2018 LVO, somebody with index Genestealers got to, what was it, top 16 or something?
This past year.
Or was it
last weekend.
Okay.
Somebody
that's right.
Top 16.
Yeah. And so Yeah, it's I can't blame it all on the army list. It could just be that I sucked at them. I don't know. But I just, in 8th edition, or in early 8th edition, I should say, I just kept losing. And so maybe it was that I was trying to mix them with the Tyranids at the time. But that was how I focused. And I'm looking at the new codex, and I'm looking at a lot of the options that you have, and I'm kind of thinking like the real power maybe in mixing them with guard.
Yeah, and to be fair, if I remember correctly, the list that went top 16 at LVO this year had a fairly sizable Tyranids detachment as well. So that could be part of it. But yeah, I do remember you kind of focused more on the Tyranids as time went on.
I did, because I love the acolyte hybrids.
Yeah,
like I love the drills and the big old saws and everything.
Yeah,
and so I didn't run a lot of neophytes. I ran a lot of the acolytes, and I didn't like the metamorphs as much. And so I had like a handful of characters, a big blob of Genestealers, and a bunch of acolyte hybrids.
Right,
and then I supported them with basically Tyranid large monsters and Tyranid artillery.
Yep.
So biovores and spore mines and tyrant guard, hive guard, the ones that shoot.
Hive guard.
Yeah, hive guard. And so I also kind of had the psychic supplementation with like zoanthropes and a neurothrope and venom thropes for cover. So I kind of tried to pull like the Tyranid shenanigans stuff. I didn't do like tons of Hormagons, Termagants, and Gargoyles or whatever. It was just all the cool, flavorful, like crazy monster Tyranids. And I supported them with that. And so it could have just been my list build. It could have been how I approached it. But what I found was that the Genestealer cult at that time was it really felt like a glass cannon.
Yeah.
But I never got it to shoot.
Sure.
So like I had this really fragile army that was set up as a glass cannon, and it never took.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, could have been my fault as the player, but
I mean, I think there's a lot that goes into that, and I think the index list minus a lot of the kind of auras and synergy that a lot of the new characters bring was definitely at a disadvantage in that sense. Stuff like adding the jackals, giving the Genestealer cults a very quick way around the table.
Oh, absolutely!
I mean, that's huge too. It is definitely a whole different army in a lot of ways. So I'm looking forward to getting to play with it a little bit, and just all the cool new models and so many different ways you can play it. And it's going to make me actually buy an Astra Militarum Codex, and that's never good. But man, cult commissars, like how can you not take a cult commissar?
Especially with that new Severina Reign.
Yeah.
Really cool looking model.
Exactly.
So one thing that I kind of want to, I got to bring up, I got to bring up the which chapter tactic. I forget what they're called in the new codex. Cult creeds.
Yep.
There's every time a new codex comes out, everybody kind of likes to theory craft on what the coolest one is. And as an aside, I'm so happy that GW did that this time around, because I have been wondering for years why like every army doesn't have marine chapter tactics.
Right.
Like
there's
orc
lots of
cultures
variations.
So I think that's great that they've pretty much just gone whole hog and everybody's got factions, you know. But I'm going to have to say my cursory inspection of it, Bladed Cog.
So I like Bladed Cog. Bladed Cog has some really interesting interactions. The 6+ invuln is really helpful because so little in the army has a lot of durability in terms of saves, and most of your infantry is toughness 3, maybe toughness 4, depending on what it is.
I could be emotionally scarred from getting tabled so many times.
That's also possible. Yeah, the losing the penalty to hit when you move and shoot heavy weapons with infantry really makes your neophyte hybrid squads great, because you can kit them all out with heavy mining lasers and sit them in the backfield on objectives and just shoot D3 shot las cannons at the army and still be able to move around. So I think Bladed Cog definitely has some appeal. Rusted Claw also kind of gives an interesting durability hit there. It's the whole +1 to your saving throws for AP0 and AP-1 attacks is
it doesn't sound like a lot, but in reality, Oh, anybody who has faced a solid Thousand Suns list knows how bad it is when there's just a tiny little rule that says, oh, by the way, if you don't meet this threshold, we get cooler.
Yeah.
So
stick unit and cover. They go from 5+ save, unit of neophyte hybrids, 5+ save up to 4+ because they're in cover, shooting at them with bolters. Guess what? They save like a Space Marine.
Yeah. Yep. It's just insane.
Yeah. It's so that durability is something that I think, especially if you're going to play a list that is more about surviving and not necessarily about controlling how many points your opponent has available to them, but more about controlling the board.
I think that's fair.
I think that goes a long way. I think at the competitive level, you're going to see at least a detachment of Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor, even if it's even if it's just a Supreme Command or like a Vanguard or something like that. You're going to see it purely to get plan generations in the making. Agents of Act 2.0 a point cheaper.
Agents of the Hive Mind.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was kind of the other point I wanted to make. Although you do make a good case for the Rusted Claw, and they do have that kind of Mad Max vibe.
They do, yeah. I'm a big fan of Twisted Helix purely because of the tricks you can pull with an Abominant.
That's fair. That's fair.
Make him the Warlord, give him the Biomorph adaptation trait, and then all of a sudden he's running around hitting on 4s with 4 attacks. He doubles his attacks on 6s. He's at strength 16, doing d6 damage with a minimum of 3. Like, he's wounding knights on 2s.
Yeah, no, it's
with a hammer.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
and that's before you decide to give him any. If you give him the elixir of the prime specimen or whatever the Twisted Helix one is, where it's extra toughness, extra wounds. It's just.
Well, there's tons of great choices.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Kind of goes back to that point we made about there's just multiple ways to play this. Like you think the Aberrants and the Abominant are awesome, then make an army for that, run them as double helix. And I don't know, for whatever reason, maybe it's the old Iron Hand player in me,
That's
but
fair.
the 6+ invuln and +1 invuln to other things that have it that aren't Genestealers or whatever.
Yeah.
Like the Bladed Cogs just pops out to me. But I agree with you that we're going to see, kind of like Drukhari, we're going to see like minimum sized little detachment of Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor just so that we can get that counterspell stratagem,
It's just so good.
Yeah, it is.
It's just so good.
It really is. And the other thing too, which is super interesting to me, and we'll see this in the coming weeks when they do the immediate FAQ and errata.
Yeah.
But the fact that like the change has already been made to the Agents of Vect stratagem to make it more expensive, and yet the Genestealer Cult Codex comes out with it at the cheaper price that Agents of Vect used to have.
Right.
Now, some might argue that was intentional because it's just thematically like, some armies get some stratagems cheaper than equivalent stratagems in other armies.
Right.
It also could just be a print time thing where maybe the Genestealer Cult Codex has been sitting in the box for a while. And
very possible.
So who's to say until we see that FAQ and errata come out? But I'm gonna go ahead and try to predict the future here. I'm going to say it does not get changed. I'm going to say it stays 3.
I think you are probably correct, which will make for a very interesting meta shift potentially.
I can hear Facebook group Drukhari players hitting their caps locks right now.
Yes, agreed. Which, sorry for them. That's no fun.
Yeah, it's true. So those are kind of the major things we wanted to point on. I mean, we could go through and do a point by point review of the entire codex, but I think the biggest thing that we kind of want to get across is like this has just got so many different ways to approach the army, and the models are just gorgeous. This faction got some serious love.
It needed it.
It absolutely did.
It needed it. And I will say, moving forward, I find the way they wrote the Brood Brothers rule to be really interesting and kind of on the point of souping imperialists and how great they've been doing. I wonder if we're going to see this kind of happen more in the future. Maybe we're seeing an early beta version just to see how it works with one army. But the whole, sure, you can take a detachment, but it's only worth half the command points.
I wonder what that may portend.
Right. I'm wondering if we'll see some more of that. And I can't say I would mind too much. Soup armies are great. I love that they do it that way, but it's nice to see a focus on one faction in an army, in my opinion.
I agree. I mean, we've talked before our podcasting days, we've talked several times about ways that we would kind of like what we think might be good ways to address that whole CP battery thing. I mean, seeing something, extra detachments only being worth half as much. I don't know that that's one that we've ever kind of come up with, but we have thought things like every detachment past the first is only ever worth 1 point.
Yeah.
Or you only get command points for the detachments that include your warlord or whatever your primary detachment is. Or, so we've had, here in Valhalla, we've had many conversations about how to address CP spam. We have some armies in the game that have to just scrape tooth and nail to come up with 8 or 9 for a game. And then other armies that are bringing 21 to 22 of them and only spending half of them during the game.
Right.
So I think I agree with you. I think that I don't think that the Genestealer Cult are going to be the only army limited in such a way.
I think you are probably right. And I would not be surprised if we saw some more things like that coming up, especially if Ynnari Codex comes out. It would not surprise me at all to see a Craft Worlds detachment or a Drukhari detachment that maybe it's not worth as many because you're drawing on resources from another faction essentially.
I think that makes sense.
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, but. Long story short, this book is great. The models are great, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do on the table.
Oh, absolutely. You did just make me think of something that I can't
Sure.
I can't not say
go for it.
I wonder how a change to that type of CP thing would affect the armies that do not have like golden thread soupy keywords. Like the Ynnari, like Tau and Orcs or Necrons, who their allies have to just be different dynasties or different cultures.
Right.
I wonder if GW will spare them that axe and say like Orcs get full command points from running different culture detachments because.
Oh yeah, no, I think it winds up being your detachment is based on your codex or whatever, or your detachment is based on your detachment keyword because they've already got the rule in place where you can't use Tyranids, Ynnari, Eldari, I can't even remember
Chaos and Imperium.
Chaos and Imperium as your detachment keyword. It can only be your army keyword.
True.
So if they pull something like that, you can have 3 orc detachments. And they're all orc detachments, so they give you full CP. Whereas if you have an Imperium army with a Space Marine detachment, a Knight detachment, and a Guard detachment, nominate a primary. Whether it's power level points, you nominate it yourself, whatever. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it happens.
That'd be my vote. I hope it goes that way because,
I agree.
Chaos, Eldari, and Imperium armies can cover each other's weaknesses, but the orcs are all orcs and the Tau are all Tau.
Yeah, and it puts orcs, Tau, and Necrons at a bit of a disadvantage in some ways because there is they don't have a way to shore up the weaknesses they have, and realistically, their books are not written in a way to make them have no weaknesses.
Yeah, that's accurate.
So, I don't know.
That was a slight tangent off of the Genestealer Cult, but just kind of down the rabbit hole from that particular conversation. But bringing it back to the main point, Genestealer Cult's awesome. New models are great.
Yeah.
Synergy looks amazing.
Looking forward to it.
I do think they're like a thinking players army.
For sure.
So I think good players are going to do really, really well with them.
I am very curious to see. I heard, I think it was a couple months ago when they first announced Genestealer Cults coming out, and they announced that they were making changes to the beta rules for reinforcements and how that worked. I heard somewhere, and I'm curious to see if it is the case, that they were going to make another change after the Genestealer Cult Codex came out to specifically call out some interactions with Cult Ambush and the new blip tokens that you get. Okay. So I'm curious to see if anything happens with that because you are kind of starting with everything on the board that's not underground. It's just your opponent doesn't know what it is yet, but you have to reveal it right away. So I'm very curious to see if anything changes there, because I think if a change happens there, you might get even more into the real psychological warfare kind of play.
It's one of my favorite things that they changed was that, like,
too.
There's something here, but don't know what it is yet.
Is it 10 hybrids or is it a lemon Russ?
Yeah, like, And we'll find out at the end of your movement phase.
Yep. Yeah, Genestealer Cults are for sure probably the first army I've seen where you almost unilaterally want to go second.
Yeah, that's fair. And correct me if I'm wrong on this one. I hope I'm not misremembering the rule, but also with those ambush blips, it's only the first model placed that has to be within a certain range, not the entire unit.
Correct.
Which means that, like, if you place a radar blip in one spot and because your opponent deploys in a certain way, you really want your unit kind of over 4 or 6 inches, you could place, like, the first guy within range and then kind of conga line the bulk of the unit out to where you really want it.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, you'll have to keep everything in coherency.
Yeah,
and the first place unit has to be within an inch, I believe it is. But then I think everything else in the model has to be within 6 inches. You have to be 9 inches away from enemies.
Yep. So you just can't cross the 9-inch threshold. But,
yeah.
But so I think that's it may not come up in every game, but that's like a really neat way to kind of shift your deployment. You know, say you have a unit of 20 Genestealers,
right?
And you put a token somewhere you thought was a good idea, and then your opponent deploys their army, and then you're like, oh crap, I really wish I was inside this building.
Right.
You could put, one Genestealer here, one Genestealer here, and then 18 Genestealers inside the building,
But that being said, I think the whole point of the blips is you don't run into that issue unless you just didn't have a blip somewhere that you would want it.
I suppose that's true, but I'm just thinking I like terrain choked tables, and so if I put something somewhere I think is clever, and then my opponent maybe out deploys me or thinks of something I didn't think of, like just having that, I really like that particular little part of it is that it's only the first model that has to be next to the blip.
Right. Well, and it lets you do some interesting stuff with screening and all that. So I agree. I think we're going to see a lot of interesting play with Genestealer Cults, and I'm hoping that they wind up being able to hold their own.
Yeah, I would love to see them kind of call back to the LVO conversation. I would love next year to see in the top 8 at least one of these armies, because it would be so amazing.
Yeah, it would.
So we're going to go ahead and take a break here because we've talked for a bit about the Genestealer Cult. And then we're going to come back and kind of talk about what we've got going on. Welcome back. We are going to kind of talk about where we're going here at the end of our first episode, things we have going on.
Yeah, it's middle of February now, and I think we both decided to do the New Year, New Army thing.
Oh yeah, because we're masochists.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean hobbyists.
Right. They rhyme.
Fists.
Yeah.
So we both kind of picked a faction that we wanted to kick off the year with, and we are putting ourselves through the paces of making sure we have a painted army, because gray plastic is the worst.
Yeah, and two people who have a background in commission painting and have yet to have painted armies that they can field because they just keep selling off their painted models. There's that. Doesn't work so well.
So I had the excuse when I was actively commission painting. I had the excuse of, well, any painting I did on my own models was painting I wasn't being paid for.
Right.
And so I just kind of like grinned and bared it and was like, my guys are gray, but like, look at this knight I just painted for somebody, or like, let me show you my portfolio. I don't suck.
It's not that I'm bad. I just,
I can paint, really, believe me. I know my Marines have no arms because they're in paintable sub-assemblies.
Right. Oh man, the bane of my existence.
See, the thing that I've always run into is I want to play before my stuff is done.
Yeah.
And so I tell myself I'm going to buy a unit, build it, paint it before I even buy the next unit. And then I realize I can't use these cool guys until I build more cool guys.
Right.
Then I end up building 1,000-point army. Well, I mean a 1,500, I mean a 2,000-point army.
I mean, apocalypse.
Yeah. And because, of course, as somebody who's pretty fastidious about how I paint my models, many things are in paintable sub-assemblies. So here I am playing games in my own shop with like a tank with no sponsons or a dude with no arms. And that got old. And, we both went, you know what? One, we've been doing this a long time and people know that we can paint decently. We're not crystal brush winners or anything, but we both do all right. And, for people to kind of show up to the shop and they're looking at our gray plastic going like, I thought you could paint, man. That got old.
Yeah.
But, a bigger thing too is the specter of what you have yet to do can be so daunting and can be such a motivation sap.
Yeah.
That both of us, like, we just looked at each other and said, if we got, even if it was just a tabletop quality, which neither of us is going to stop at, but if we just got an army done, it takes the pressure off because, like, you know what? If somebody wants a game, well, I guess I'll just take my army that's done and I'll keep working on this other project as long as it takes me.
Right.
And I don't have to feel like, oh crap, I got to get this stuff done because I have a painted army.
Yep.
And that was kind of, in our discussions, like, okay, let's pick something. We're going to pick something, new year, new army.
Yep.
Let's do this. And I went back to something I did a little bit ago and then sold because that's
what we do.
I went to the Custodes. I'm going to be completely transparent. It's because I only have to paint 25 models. Also, I like them a lot. They're cool. But I told you, I was like, you know what? It's super convenient that I love these dudes. And I used to have an army. I love it. I actually like the color gold. Like, yeah, but it's super convenient that there's only like 20 guys. So
yeah. And me being the masochist I am, I went, ooh, Genestealer Cults. Those are pretty. Also, Tyranids are pretty cool and guards. So why don't I just pick an army that in the 2,000 point list, I'm going to need like 100 bodies. Sure. Why not? So that's where I'm going with it, and I'm very excited about the models and very much dreading the next couple months as I slowly grind away at the hobby side of it because I love painting. Assembling is not always the best, and that's a lot of models.
That's fair. I mean, I'm so fortunate to have a partner that is very what's the word I want to be like? Diligent, I guess would be the best word. And she will put a movie on Netflix and cut and clean. She'll cut stuff off the sprue, clean all the mold lines while she's watching a movie. I am so fortunate because I think I'd rather pull my own teeth than cut and clean a whole army.
Yeah.
And I love assembling them. I love posing dudes. I love gluing them together.
It's the cutting and cleaning that's just
that's
tedious.
It's the worst. So I'm very fortunate that I, every so often I come home with 5 or 6 kits and I'm like, look what I got. And I just get a giant eye roll and then the tablet comes out and Netflix goes on.
Yep.
I'm like, what am I doing first? I'm like, I love you.
Yep. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here with my wife's 1,000 sons going, so I get to assemble these and paint them, huh? Great. You'll get a painted army sometime eventually.
You got to spend that family time together. Sit down and teach her how to
She
paint.
doesn't like painting or assembling.
Oh,
She just likes to play.
Okay.
I'm like, all right. Well,
all right.
I'll make it work.
That's fair.
Gives us something to do, right?
Yeah, I suppose that's true. So that's kind of where we're at. Where I'm working on the Adeptus Custodes. Nate's working on the Genestealer Cult.
Yeah.
So we figure what we'll do on these episodes is kind of give an update of where we're at and kind of hold each other accountable. And you guys can do that too out there at home. You can comment on these videos and motivate us through chastisement or praise, whichever suits you best. I think a combination of both is probably helpful.
Commiserate with us.
Yes. You can post comments about your own closet of shame or whatever you want to call your boxes and boxes of unpainted models.
Yeah. Throw it on our Facebook group. Throw up some pictures.
Yeah, absolutely. Share it.
Links
Take a picture.
will be in the description.
show us how far behind you are.
Yeah.
We can all
make us feel better.
Pour one out for the unbuilt models.
Oh, man. Pour one out. I'm going to have to pour out about 10 cases.
I just want to pour models on the table and have my partner put them together.
Yeah.
So where we're at? How about you go first? Like where are you at in your New Year, New Army here on February?
I actually 17. Have some stuff put together. Been working on the Genestealers to start for my Genestealer Cults. So I've got the 22 Space Hulk Genestealers and the Broodlord from that, which I'll probably just run as a Patriarch, but I don't know, might put together the Patriarch. I'm not planning on running more than one of them. But got those put together. I'm working on painting those up. Hoping to have the unit of 15 that I'm planning to actually bring as part of the army done, hopefully in the next week or two here. They're mostly painted at this point. Just got to finish up some detail work. But beyond that, got a bunch of the new Genestealer Cult models, and so now it's time to move on to assembling and cleaning and all that fun stuff.
All the best. Well, the nice thing is you're going to have like 900 individual characters, so that'll be cool.
True. Yeah, yeah. But what about you? You're already pretty far with your custodians, right?
I am, because I had help.
Okay. Sure.
The one thing, you may only have 25, 30, whatever models in the Custodian's army, but like each dude is 20 pieces.
Yeah.
Because the front of the calf, the back of the calf, the top of the boot, the bottom of the boot.
Right.
So there's a lot of cutting and cleaning before you can get to assembly, and I have help with that part. So that sped me along there. So I'm running a pretty straightforward. I veer off a little bit from the conventional wisdom of cramming jet bikes down my opponent's throat.
Right.
I do enjoy the jet bikes. Have a unit of them, and then one captain on jet bike. But I tend to favor the Alaris custodians. I just like them. I think they're cool. So I have those included in my army. Have everything assembled. Bikes are in paintable sub-assemblies because I want to paint the bikes completely before I put the riders on.
Right. Those bases turned out really nice too.
Thank you.
So I'm excited to see everything put together with those.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I have pretty much everything in the army is base coated, like washed, highlighted, and on bases, with the exception of I'm using the Forge World Ixian Hail model as kind of accounts as Trajan Valoris. Not that I don't. The Trajan model is amazing, but I had gotten my hands on Ixian Hail back when he was released, I think at an Adepticon or something.
Yeah, it was a while back.
And been kind of lamenting that he's basically just a shield captain because he's so cool. So I run him as my Trajan, and maybe I've kind of joked that as a present to myself when I finish the army, I might actually buy Trajan and then just really go all the way painting him.
Yeah.
So I've Ixian Hail. He's kind of glued to a stick because I want to do him up really nice. I've got his head done. His head, really pleased with how the skin tones came out.
Yeah.
I did his skin tone through just priming it an ivory color and then just all glazes.
Yeah.
And
it did turn out nice.
I'm really happy with that.
Let's see if we can get a good macro shot of that.
Yeah, I think that would be cool to get some pictures up. Yeah. So I'm pretty much to the details, like all most of their plumes are red, but not all of them. But the plumes haven't been washed or highlighted or anything. But the armor is largely done. Yeah. Weapon details still need to be done. So I can, if somebody's on the other side of the game room, they might think my army is painted.
Right.
But that's a lie. They are not. They're what I would call base coated to the point that I don't hate them.
Yeah, they're very quickly approaching the hot garbage phase.
Yeah, and that was kind of, speaking of, that was one of the jokes that we made, is like, okay, are we doing this New Year, New Army to a tabletop standard, or to like a high standard, or we don't want to drive ourselves nuts going to a display standard, but we're both like picky enough about our paint jobs that like
a little particular.
Yeah, we're a little driven, so to speak, just not motivated. But so the standard that we kind of came to was we're going to paint them until we don't hate them.
Good standard.
So that's the, as commission painters and stuff, if we just kind of did like a 3-color minimum, it would drive us nuts. So we can't stop there. But as soon as we're like, yeah, this guy looks all right, that's when we're going to stop. At least for now. I mean, we'll always come back later. But yeah, the kind of both of us are trying to really train ourselves in the mantra of don't let perfect be the enemy of the good, or the enemy of the done. Because at this point, the project is really about getting our stuff painted.
New year, new army.
Exactly. Yep. And now we talked earlier on in this episode about bat reps and things like that. So I also want us to kind of like train ourselves to like pick a project and get it done, because I would like to have a plethora of factions available for our battle reports.
Absolutely.
And I absolutely want to make sure that whatever we're putting on the table in a battle report is a fully painted model. Because I've seen some battle reports out there where dudes are just rocking the gray. And while I can appreciate that,
we're going to try to avoid that.
I appreciate it as a Carcharodon player, though.
Well, I mean, that's true.
But that's
fair.
But yeah, so I mean, we want to avoid that, and this is kind of cracking the whip on ourselves so that we can build those good habits. Lots of people say paint for an hour a day or whatever it is you do. We just basically want to get in the habit of painting so that we can make better content for you guys. We can enjoy our hobby more, and if we decide to go to a tournament, we can make a good showing.
Absolutely.
So it's really kind of about, I guess, training ourselves. But that's kind of where we're at in our hobby progress. I know right now I want to get my jet bikes done. That's my goal. I'm hoping that next time, when we record episode 2, my unit of 5 Virtus Praetors, for their fancy crazy names, will be 100%. That's my personal goal. 100% by next recording on the bikes.
We'll get some photos of those up, and I'm hoping all my Genestealers and that Broodlord model are wrapped up by then. And hopefully, I get some of the other stuff assembled in the meantime. So,
nice.
Yeah. But so normally at this point we'd go on and kind of hit our mailbag and go through any questions or comments that we've had come through. But this being the first episode and us not having a huge presence yet, we don't really have any of that. So we thought we'd talk about, at least briefly, something that we both have harped on a few times and we've heard rumblings about in our local meta, as well as, of course, on the internet and all sorts of other places. And that being, if there was a rule or a set of rules in 8th edition, what would we change? And I think we can both pretty comfortably say terrain. Yeah, so
it's so bad.
It really just... So I started in 5th edition, and I felt like the terrain rules in 5th edition were really cool. I liked the way they played out. I liked the way they interacted with models. Sure, there was some stuff that was unnecessary, but it felt like the terrain actually mattered beyond, is it a ruin? Do I get cover? Can you see me?
Yeah, basically. Well, the other thing, too, is... So this is me. I'm going to go back to 3rd edition. But in 3rd edition, there was... variations based on how hard the cover was. If your Marines were standing in tall grass, it was and this was back when cover save was a separate save, but it was like tall grass was a 6+ cover save. Hardened stuff like wood or stone was a 5+ cover save, and it had to be a manufactured specifically for defense piece of terrain to get a 4+ cover save. Yep. So if you were behind a barricade or you were behind a wall, 4 up. If you were behind a pile of rocks, 5 up. If you were in tall grass or a pile of leaves or whatever, or in water, 6 up. Yep. Because that was back when the cover save replaced your armor save. So seeing cover just be this blanket, like, are you in cover or not? Like, I get they wanted to streamline the game. I was really disappointed that they didn't split cover and concealment. And I, if you want to say cover is just +1 to your armor save, okay, sure. It feels kind of lazy to me, but okay, cool. Sure. But the whole requirement of a vehicle being inside the terrain and 50% obscured to get that bonus, I've played a game here in the shop. I was playing against a Necron player. Yeah. We're playing on a city table, and he had a Triarch Stalker at 1 inch away from its maximum range in his deployment zone. And I've got, I think it was a Gorkanaut or something on the other side of the table. And we are shooting at each other through a tiny little window in one of the GW tile-based buildings, like the Sanctum Imperialis or whatever, one of the Latin buildings.
Right.
And
High Gothic.
Yeah, High Gothic, yes. Through the High Gothic window,
right?
We could literally only see like a centimeter of each other's models, and we're sniping each other through this window. No penalty.
Right. We did the same thing in, I think it was, Orcs versus Blood Angels, where Land Raider and Gorkanaut were shooting at each other. Just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and so just the requirement that the vehicle be in, if you're going to just blanket say that cover just equals +1 to your armor save,
right?
Say that like infantry models have to be in the terrain. Big stuff, monsters, vehicles, whatever, just have to be 50% obscured by it.
Right.
Or, like I would prefer, separate cover and concealment. Yeah. Say, if the model's obscured, -1 to hit. If the model's in cover, +1 to armor save. If in both. To make them both pass-fail, if this, then this, if this, then this, and whatever you qualify for, you get.
Right.
If you want it streamlined.
Yeah.
But it's weird that they came up with a very, what I feel, they thought streamlined, I feel lazy, cover mechanic, and then went on to delineate every single piece of terrain and how there's all these like pass-fail conditions in each individual piece of terrain.
Yeah.
Like, what was the point of a remedial simple cover mechanic if you're then going to spell everything out?
Right.
And then worse yet, where's water? Oh, that floors me. You had for edition after edition after edition, vehicles like Chimeras had a special rule that let them do something cool in water.
Yeah.
And then you get to 8th edition.
Or whatever.
Yeah, you get to 8th edition and water falls under scratch-built terrain, make up your own rules and agree with your opponent. Like, really?
Yep. I think that's why you see things like the ITC having their own terrain rules for a lot of stuff, just to deal with that. But I mean, I think kind of on that note and talking about the concealment and everything, we've talked a little bit and need to experiment a little more with it. But the Cities of Death rules from Chapter Approved 2018.
Love most of them.
Yeah. Bringing some of that back into our normal games of 40K, I think really addresses a lot of that. And
I would agree with that.
I'm sure we'll be reporting back on how our games go as we run through that more and more. But just the obscurement, the different levels of cover, the dangerous terrain, which was just a fun rule.
I miss that so much.
Yeah.
I miss like imagining like trees that have like choking tendrils and spike pits and stuff.
I'm walking through lava, so there's probably going to be something that could potentially go wrong.
Yeah, like you look out there, you see a bunch of people's armies that like where their models are based on lava bases, and you're like, he's wearing a robe, like.
How is he not on fire?
Yeah, is this a good idea? But lava doesn't do anything. That's why they have it modeled that way, right? Because there's no rules for lava.
Right. That's fair.
Now, lava's not hot in the 41st millennium.
Yeah, and lava bases are cool. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah, they're awesome. They're absolutely awesome. It's just funny. Like, oh yeah, well that's why that entire Sisters of Battle army is not on fire because lava doesn't do anything.
Right. So yeah. So I don't know. I think we need to kind of play around with that a little more and try it out. But we're both definitely in agreement that terrain needs a facelift. Yeah.
And now, perhaps I'm in the minority. I don't know. But I love me some terrain choked tables.
Yeah.
The fact that, when I think battles in the 41st millennium, not to cross over and refer to other media or whatever, I think Gears of War. I think, going through the tunnels underground in Aliens, or like fighting corridor to corridor in games like Space Hulk. I generally don't think of Space Marines lining up on opposite sides of a grassy field like in Braveheart. That's more of a Age of Sigmar or a Warhammer Fantasy kind of thing.
Right.
And so I love me just terrain choked tables. Maybe you do it with hills and you have big caverns and like maybe it's an area where like a convoy has to go through. Or whatever. But so that's for me as a player who I like the table to inconvenience the game to some extent. Like I don't want to break everything because I can't put my dudes in the other place or whatever.
Right.
But I like to be stymied by the table. And that makes, for me, part of the hobby, like setting up the table before the game, like the table itself tells a story before the armies even get there.
Yeah.
And even if you're playing a competitive game, some of that fun and some of the immersion comes from the table. And if the terrain doesn't do anything, they might as well be, pop cans and stacks of textbooks.
Exactly. And I think one of the big things is terrain in 8th edition as it stands just doesn't feel like there's all that much interaction.
Yeah, agreed. There's
just not, like you said, it could just be blank shapes and it wouldn't really make that much of a difference.
Yeah, and that's why I tend to favor urban tables.
Yeah.
Because buildings are a good way to choke terrain.
Yeah.
And so one of the jokes I made when we were talking about this city fight rules and adapting them to regular games, I kind of was like, wait, people play 40K not in the city? Like, people play on tables that aren't urban tables? Like, why aren't city fight rules part of the main rules?
Right.
But that's just me, probably at least 40, if not 50% of my games are on a table covered in Imperial buildings. Because I'm fortunate enough that I have terrain for the shop. So I've got a lot of GW's kits that I can, because I provide terrain for people to come into the store and play. So I've got a pretty decent selection of cool blowed up buildings,
Right.
And so to me, I play most of my games on that. And so it's kind of sucky to have, like, I can only see 2 millimeters of the side of your, whatever your unit, whatever it is. I'm 48 inches away. I'm going to tag you with this, las cannon, and I suffer absolutely no penalty for having to, it's kind of like the old, that old commercial, like Nothing But Net, when I fire my las cannon off the side of this and through the dumpster and over the window and nothing but sponson.
That's a nice antenna you have there. I'm going to hit the rest of you.
Yeah.
Without any penalty, despite the fact that that's all I can see.
So with that, we kind of wanted to talk about the city fight rules and kind of just a very basic overview of what we think would best be adapted to regular 40K.
Yeah. So I think obscurement is a great rule to add.
Absolutely.
I'm partial to forest tables.
That's
stuff
fair.
With a lot of ruins and forests and that. I mean, I think I have like 50 some trees for my home table. So I like fair. Forest tables a lot and things that work like that, where obscurement is more the thing.
We are a knife ear player, so it makes sense that you would have trees.
Yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, I think obscurement, varying levels of cover we talked about with soft and hard cover just gives it a little more depth. And I think it brings a little benefit to your scouts, your rangers.
Absolutely.
The units that get that extra oomph from being in cover.
Well, it also allows there to be some mechanical difference for folks who are, maybe they're doing 3D printed terrain, or maybe they buy terrain from other companies or other than GW, or they're scratch building their own terrain.
Yeah.
Say you plop down a big Imperial building that's like a $50 GW kit, and then next to it is something you got 3D printed for $12 off of Etsy.
Right.
And one of them's like a sandbag building and the other one's this big ceramite church. To have hard and soft cover, you can say, okay, well, this building only gives you +1.
Yeah,
this building gives you +2. And then it also kind of, I say this as a retailer, when people buy the good looking stuff, it's sometimes not enough for it to just look cooler.
Yep. That's very true.
If somebody really wanted to build an awesome home table and they actually went out and bought like the whole Wall of Martyrs set. I mean, as we're talking here, I'm looking over at my Arctic table, has like 6 feet of Imperial barricades and bunkers on it.
Yep.
And if somebody for their home table went and bought all that stuff and they spent $200 to provide an awesome table for their buddies, I want it to be better.
Yeah.
Sure. So if you're just 3D printing sandbags or craft store scratch building sandbag barricades, and then your buddy shells out $40 for a cool looking model that's like a hardened position.
Right.
It just feels like some variation in the terrain rules kind of justify that expenditure.
Yeah. And honestly, I'm fine with scratch built, heavily defended, whatever.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not downplaying hobbying. I'm not. That's not at all.
Right. I agree. It seems weird to me that if I'm trying to hide from a battle cannon shell, I get the same benefit hiding behind a wood fence as I do hiding behind a 3-foot thick steel wall.
Absolutely.
just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Absolutely. So that's something that definitely the hardness off cover, obscurement. I absolutely think those should just, I don't even think we need to play test that. I think obscurement and hardness off cover should just like just move those, port those straight to 40K.
Yeah. And it's not to say that, you can't in your local gaming group or whatever say, hey, let's play with these rules. It's kind of a house rule. It's kind of just a thing that GW released, but it's not part of the main game. I think more the argument that we often try to make is that it should just be part of the game by standard.
I agree. And, that gets into the whole raw versus rye or rules as written versus rules as intended idea of, because part of this game is going out into the gaming community and playing people you don't know. I mean, if you're fortunate enough to have places to go, some people, the 3 buddies that they play with in the basement are all they've got. And that's cool. If that's, not denigrating that at all. But kind of one of the driving things in this hobby is to, go play somewhere new, meet new people. And since you don't know if you're going to run into rules as intended people or rules as written people, the game should have some guidance in that way.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's my argument for why it should be part of the core rules instead of, well, let's just agree to this because it's better. Well, you could fix every problem in the game with let's just agree to this if it's better, but it's not a standard.
They recommend you do it in the rules, in fact.
Exactly. But it's not a standard that you can like, I just happen to be visiting my cousin in another city and he's busy right now, so I'm going to go check out the GameStop or Game Shop, I should say.
It works great amongst friends. Yeah. It doesn't work so great amongst strangers.
Or at tournaments. And so that's why we make, I preface everything, just like Nate was saying, that's why we make the argument that certain things should just be core in the rules. Yep. Lucky Shot, which is the city fight version of you always hit on a 6, kind of like the Orc Daka. That's probably my least favorite one of them. I think the army that suffered the most in a field of negative modifiers, the army that really, really was punished by that was the Orcs. And the new Orc Codex has just addressed that. So I'm less of a fan of that particular city fight rule. It's great in Kill Team. But in greater 40K, I don't think it's necessary.
I agree.
But your mileage may vary.
Same with the Streets and Roads rule. There was a thing in 5th edition. I think it was around before that too. I'm not positive, but I just don't think it makes that much of a difference. Like, sure, it's cool, but on the grand scale, when you get up into a size of a game like you do with 40K, I don't know that it really makes that much of a difference. And honestly, I think it kind of unbalances a lot of things.
I would agree with that.
Nobody wants to see Orc Evil Sun bikes moving 20 inches.
An extra 3.
Right.
Well, and the other thing too is I get that. I think one, it was trying to address the story benefits of using roads versus not roads, but also I think it was to try to offset how good Fly is.
It is very good.
And but it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like adding too much ketchup to food, We're like, I mean, I like ketchup, but like at a certain point there's a threshold of like ketchup. And one of the strengths of 8th edition is, as much as we are complaining about it, but one of the strengths of 8th edition is it's a better game.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite editions, if not my favorite edition.
And so to just put too much ketchup on the hot dog, so to speak. Right. And I think that's what the roads thing does. Like it's cool, it makes sense, unnecessary. Right. That's just me.
Yep.
The higher ground one, kind of dig that one. Not sure about making it a core 40K rule or not, but
definitely want to play test that one.
That one is for folks who haven't read all of the rules. That one is if the firing model is at least 3 inches above, elevation wise above its target, the target is denied cover.
No,
isn't it?
No, it's +1 or -1 AP.
Oh, -1 AP. I apologize.
Yeah. I don't think it's denied cover. I'd have to double check.
Well, functionally the same thing.
Yes, essentially.
It's not specifically the rule of.
If they're not in cover, they're even worse off.
Yeah. It's not. It's not like specifically shutting off the rule of cover. It's functionally denied cover because they get a -1 to the armor save. And so I like that one. I do like that one because, I mean, as Obi-Wan Kenobi taught us, high ground, that's an advantage.
Right.
And so I like that rule. But again, I'm not sure as it plays out. Could be unbalancingly powerful if you deploy the right units in the right places. That one could really offset things. So that one I think does need some play testing.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. Dangerous terrain is the other one we've talked about a little bit. I would like to see it because I think it's just fun and kind of fluffy and does cool stuff. But at the same time, it does make fly even better.
It does.
So that's kind of that would need some looking at as well.
I think, they could, granted this gets back to adding too much ketchup,
right?
But they could get back to kind of like how they had it in earlier editions, where if something that flies ends its move or begins its move,
then it has to take the tests.
In something that's classified as dangerous, which granted, kind of weird because it makes flight more like a jump pack that you're like hopping from place to place and less like you're just persistently in the air.
Yeah.
But
you'd have to probably have to specify jump and jetpack infantry or something like that. I don't know. It gets to be. Yeah.
But I think systemically, even if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that like an Eldar flyer is touching down at the end of every movement phase, still just to keep it from unbalancing, if you introduce it just to say like, you know what, if you ended your move here, even if you're in the air, if you ended your move here, you flew too close.
Right.
And so in that respect, I could see it just to make sure that it's balanced.
Yeah.
To tag on top of that, I kind of dig immobilized. I wish they would bring back something like that. I mean, I know that the vehicles don't have the damage charts that they used to have, but like if there was also some rule where like when a Land Raider Kool-Aid man's through the side of a building, I'd like to see something where it's like, oh, you got stuck.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Land Raiders can't Kool-Aid man through buildings anymore.
They can't the way, in story, that's what they're doing. But now, like mechanically, they're losing the 3 inches to go up the wall and a millimeter to go across the wall and 3 inches to go down the wall. So the wall subtracts 6 inches from the Land Raiders movement.
Right.
But like, and I guess maybe that's to represent, if you really kind of wrap your brain around it, the loss of those 6 inches is it getting hung up on the wall as it drives through the wall. Right. But the stuff goes wrong, and that's something I kind of dug about, like when anything went through, or any vehicle went through dangerous or difficult terrain, there was that chance it got stuck.
Yeah.
And I kind of,
at the same time though, it always felt so bad.
It did, but it also felt so. Okay, I'm an orc player, and to truly be one with Gork and Mork, you have to have as much fun removing your own stuff from the table as you do removing the other people's stuff.
That's true.
So, like, while it did not feel good when an immobilized result cost you the game, it sure was funny.
That's true.
You're like, yeah, I'm the idiot who drove my truck through a building.
Yeah,
it got stuck. That's on me.
That's fair.
But that's me just waxing philosophic about. I just miss the 3rd edition days where you could win a game through sheer crazy rhino maneuvers, like blocking bridges and stuff with your sideways turned rhinos.
Yeah, there's a fine balance between we're just basically using shapes and math, and we're playing a game, and there's it's kind of a narrative element to it where that actually matters. So terrain influences that a lot, and I think we really just want to see the game encourage using the terrain and interacting with the terrain as much as possible.
Well, yeah, players in this hobby, we spend so many hours, staring at a dude's left calf, or whatever, because we're trying to paint things and we're posing them all in these cool poses and we're building these lists and imagining these epic battles in our head. And then we get to the battlefield and it's it's like playing Tron, right? Like it's just this grid that's laid out and there's like shiny things moving around the board and rolling dice at each other. So anything that adds to the immersion that makes it feel like the epic battle, like, Bob the commissar doing rad stuff over here, is made better by like, oh, he ducked behind this building and this cool thing happened. But like, if it's like, I shall hide Bob behind this geometric shape and now your dice are at a penalty, like that makes the game less fun.
Agreed.
I do want to keep the game streamlined.
Yep.
I don't want the bloated, rotting carcass of 7th edition to come back. But while there is a bit of poetic parallel between that and the Imperium.
Wow. Yeah, that's true.
But I just want to see a little bit more immersion on my table.
Yeah, agreed.
So that would be us waxing philosophic about terrain rules, because that's what we feel is the thing that we would change.
Over the next couple of weeks here, we'll try out some games with the Cities of Death rules, at least the ones we've talked about here, and report back next time we record, maybe, and just kind of let you know how it went.
Yeah, I'm hoping we can get Nate's Genestealer Cults on the table, and I'm hoping so. See what we can try out with those.
Maybe I'll have to farm out some of the assembly.
Hey, I know somebody.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Right.
She's busy building Custodes right now.
Oh, okay.
No, I kid. They're all built.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're running long here, so
absolutely.
why don't we close this up and
sure.
Appreciate everybody listening. And,
for sure.
Keep an eye on our Facebook page or Twitter, Instagram, whatever we happen to be posting on.
This is where we do like, share, and subscribe.
You had to say it, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
Sure.
I said it ironically.
Oh, ironically. Got it. Yeah, I'll put up some
bell.
Links. Oh no. Here we go. Anyway, that's it for us today.
Yep.
Next time we'll come back and probably be talking about Shadow Spear, assuming it comes out when we're expecting it to.
Shadow Spear, some new chaos stuff. We got talk more about hobby progress, and maybe we can try to lay out how we might do battle reports coming up soon. So
or maybe we'll have some content between now and then.
Oh, so many maybes.
It's a lot of maybes.
It's a lot of maybes.
Maybe we should just come back next time.
Hey, see you next time.
See you guys.